The following podcast contains discussions of kidnapping, questionable emotional bonds due to said kidnapping, and characters basically being #problematic. Also, spoilers. Lots of spoilers. Ready? Let's dig in. If she had known how much a rose would cost her, she would have asked for something else, like her sisters had. A dress made of silk and satin, a shiny necklace, or a golden comb. Instead, she's sitting here in an enormous, empty palace. Every movement echoing in the vast space, trapped between silence and a big, blank beast. He wasn't very frightening now. In fact, he was polite to the point of dullness. So how could she complain, really, if the worst she could say of a monster was, he was dull? Really, really dull. And what else could she do but sit and smile and answer his dull questions? What else could she do but say yes when he asks if she could get used to living here? What else could she do but save her father, her sisters, her brothers by swallowing every whimper in exchange for a whim that had caused all this in the first place? But the monster has one more surprise in store as he turns to her and asks, Voulez-vous coucher avec moi? Pardon my French. He asks, may I sleep with you tonight? I don't think English makes that question any better. Ooh la la, the French, so risque. Hi, I'm Gabby, and this is Digestibles, a podcast about all the books you were told to read but probably didn't. And today, we'll explore a tale as old as time. And yes, I'll get to why the beast asks to sleep with Beauty later, but before that, a little background. So, fairy tales began as an oral tradition, meaning they were rarely written down and passed by word of mouth. They weren't even called fairy tales until 17th century France when aristocratic ladies invented a parlor game for their salons. Salons being something like a club where they would gather to share or debate ideas. The game was simply to tell stories based on old folk tales. Some of these stories were collected and published, one in 1697 called Les Contes des Fées, literally, the tales of fairies. Thus, the literary fairy tale was born. One of the most beloved ones is Beauty and the Beast. First written by Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve in 1740, it didn't really become that popular until 1756, when Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont published her own version, which was shortened and simplified for children. She got away with it because copyright laws didn't really exist then. For today, we'll stick with de Villeneuve because it's longer and has more crazy awesome melodrama, and if you know me, you know I love my drama. So let's begin, like all fairy tales do, with Once Upon a Time. In a great city, there lived a wealthy merchant who had 6 sons and 6 daughters. Since there's no mention of a mother, I'll assume she's gone because of exhaustion. Imagine all those kids? Wow. Anyway, the merchant is rich, like super rich, and wants for nothing except maybe some conflict? You know, to make this story more interesting. So a series of unfortunate events falls on this family. First, their house catches fire and they lose almost all of their possessions. Then, he receives word that all his trading ships are lost at sea, either by shipwreck or by pirates. And if this wasn't enough, even his business partners start to betray him. The merchant goes bankrupt and loses everything except for a small house in the country, far, far away from the city. His children are obviously not pleased with this change in circumstance. They move to the country, start wearing ugly clothes, and are forced to do housework. Because they're poor now. Quelle horreur. All that is, except for the youngest girl who decides to look at the brighter side of life. She remains cheerful and nice and without any resentment whatsoever. In fact, her inside matches her outside so much that people begin to call her the Beauty. 2 years pass, and one day, the father receives news that one of his ships has finally arrived at port. He tells his children about it, and everyone is excited to return to their former lives. They ask their father to bring luxurious gifts when he returns home. In essence, pasalubong. The father returns to Beauty, now 16 years old, and asks her what she would like. She tells him to bring home her favorite flower, a rose. So the merchant leaves for the city, but when he gets there, he finds that everything valuable has already been taken from his ships to pay for his debts. He has no choice but to return home empty-handed. And even worse luck, the weather becomes bad on his journey. He gets lost in the forest and almost freezes to death. Exhausted, he stumbles on a path that leads him to a beautiful castle that is remarkably untouched by the bad storm. Even stranger, there are lifelike human-sized statues scattered carelessly everywhere. In the middle of the road, among the trees, on the steps leading inside the palace, he enters and sees no one there. He stops in a room with a large fire. Tired, he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, there's a feast in front of him. He says thanks to the empty room and eats. He goes around the castle. Still seeing no one, he decides to take whatever valuable thing he can find, filling his pockets as he imagines his family living there. After all, possession is 9/10 of the law. No one would object if they squat in the castle. He begins to make plans in his head. He walks into a garden that's in bloom in spite of the weather and sees exquisite rose bushes. He thinks, perfect, he can take some home to Beauty.
He had never seen such lovely roses. Their perfume reminded him that he had promised to give Beauty a rose. He picked one and was about to gather enough to make 6 bouquets when a most frightful noise made him turn round. He was terribly alarmed upon perceiving at his side a horrible beast, which, with an air of fury, laid upon his neck a kind of trunk resembling an elephant's and said, with a terrific voice,
"Who gave thee permission to gather my roses? Is it not enough that I kindly allowed thee to remain in my palace? Instead of feeling grateful, rash man, I find thee stealing my flowers. Thy insolence shall not remain unpunished."
The good man, already too much overpowered by the unexpected appearance of this monster, thought he should die of fright at these words, and quickly throwing away the fatal rose,
"My lord,"
said he, prostrating himself before him,
"have mercy on me. I am not ungrateful. Penetrated by all your kindness, I did not imagine that so slight a liberty could possibly have offended you."
The monster very angrily replied,
"Hold thy tongue, thou foolish talker. I care not for thy flattery, nor for the titles thou bestows on me. I am not my lord. I am the beast, and thou shalt not escape the death thou deservest."
Frightened for his life, the merchant tells the beast his entire sad life story, just like every contestant in a reality show, so the beast will take pity on him. And it works. The beast decides not to kill him, but asks that he sacrifices one of his daughters instead. The merchant reluctantly agrees. Wow, good job, Dad. The beast tells him to return in a month, and the next morning, the merchant finds a horse to take him home and a cloak to keep him warm. On the journey back, he regrets everything he promised the beast. No shit, Sherlock. But as hard as he tries, he cannot retrace his steps. And because the horse is a magic horse which flies rather than runs, the merchant soon finds himself home, facing his worried children. He tries to put on a happy face, but when he gives Beauty her rose, he has no choice but to tell her what it'll cost. Everybody reacts accordingly. His sons want to storm the castle and kill the beast. His daughters are afraid that they'll be chosen and killed. Beauty, being the good daughter and also slightly out of guilt, immediately volunteers as tribute. Her father doesn't want her to. The other children blame him of favoritism. It's kinda true. Beauty tries to calm everyone down, saying the monster probably won't eat her. Her sisters roll their eyes at her, and I'm going to spoil it now that her sisters are jealous brats until the very end because apparently, character development is only reserved for the protagonist in these types of stories. A month passes and the magic horse returns to take Beauty away. Her father goes with her and tries to talk her out of it, but Beauty is determined. As soon as they arrive at the castle, they're greeted by fireworks. Is the beast so hungry he needs to celebrate his dinner? Beauty jokes. They enter the hall where food is laid out for them. So far, no monster appears and Beauty is relieved. It's a nice castle, and maybe it won't be so bad living there. Sorry to break it to you, girl, but you might want to manage your expectations.
Her hope did not last long, however. The monster made himself heard. A frightful noise, caused by the enormous weight of his body, but the terrible clank of his scales, and an awful roaring announced his arrival. Terror took possession of Beauty. The old man, embracing his daughter, uttered piercing cries. But recovering herself in a moment, she suppressed her agitation. Seeing the beast approach, whom she could not behold without a shudder, she advanced with a firm step, and with a modest air saluted him very respectfully. This behavior pleased the monster. After having contemplated her, he said to the old man, in a tone which, without being one of anger, might, however, fill with terror the boldest heart. "Good evening, my good friend." And turning to Beauty, he said also to her, "Good evening, Beauty." The old man, fearing every instant that something awful would happen to his daughter, had not the strength to reply. But Beauty, without agitation and in a sweet and firm voice, said, "Good evening, Beast."
Do you come here voluntarily?
Inquired the Beast.
And will you consent to let your father depart without following him?
Beauty replied that she had no other intention.
Ah! And what do you think will become of you after his departure?
"What it may please you," said she. "My life is at your disposal, and I submit blindly to the fate which you may doom me to."
Yes, Beauty, baby! Yes, go girl, give us nothing! I love your lack of energy, girl. But fine, let's give her a pass since she's trying to save her father's life. Non-reaction pleases the beast and he gives the merchant some clothes and jewels and gold before he leaves. Beauty goes to her room to sleep and she dreams she's in the bank of a canal, surrounded by orange trees. A handsome young man appears. He tells her he loves her and not to be sad. Oh, and that she shouldn't judge with her eyes. He disappears and her dream changes. This time, she's with a beautiful lady who also tells her to look beyond appearances. These weird dreams continue until she hears her name being called 12 times. She wakes up alone in her bedroom. She spends the day exploring the castle. She finds a hall of mirrors, a music room, a library. Most importantly, she finds a portrait of the young man she sees in her dreams. Who could he be, she wonders. Day turns to night, and after dinner, the beast surprises her with a visit. He talks to her, and she finds out that he's more inclined to stupidity than to ferocity. Yes, that's the actual quote. Then, the beast asks Beauty to marry him. At least that's what all modern translations and retellings say. But in the original French, he actually asks if he can sleep with her. Most likely to emphasize that Beauty has a choice and that the beast is not really a beast since he won't force himself on her. I mean, he's basically holding her hostage though. Let's not give him cookies for doing the bare minimum. Anyway, marriage. Beauty is surprised and doesn't know how to answer. The beast assures her that she can simply say yes or no. So she says no. The beast wishes her a good night and leaves. While sleeping, she dreams again, seeing the young man in 100 different places and 100 different circumstances. In one of her visions, he offers her a crown. The next morning, she goes into the garden and recognizes many spots in it. In fact, these are places where she meets her dream boy. In the story, she calls him the Unknown, so, I guess I'll call him that moving forward. She spends the day exploring the castle again. This time, she finds a room full of rare birds that begin to sing to her. Another room has parrots, which makes her happy because now she has someone to talk to. And another room is filled with monkeys who dance and put on a show for her. It's funny because the beast is never fully described, leaving whatever he looks like to the reader's imagination. But the story says that some of these monkeys have human faces, which, nightmares. Beauty finds them cute though, which is the only opinion that matters. After dinner, the beast appears again and asks the same question. She gives the same answer. At night, she dreams of the unknown, whom she's slowly falling in love with. Day number whatever. She explores the palace again because there's obviously nothing else to do. This time, she finds a room with 4 windows. She'll open a different window per day, and I'll just recap so I don't bore you. The windows are crystal mirrors that reflect a part of the outside world. One of them opens to theaters where she can watch Italian comedies or an opera. Another opens to the Fair of Saint-Germain, which is like a night market of sorts. The third to the Tuileries, a fashion palace in Paris, and the last opens to whatever important thing is happening in the world at the moment. It's basically like a news channel. So, Beauty visits the world through windows every day, and every night, the beast arrives to ask her his question. It's beginning to annoy her, but she doesn't want to anger the beast. So she complains to her unknown instead. Wow, we love an emotional support dream boy.
The unknown, who but awaited that moment to appear, reproached her tenderly for her delay. He found her melancholy, lost in thought, and inquired what could have displeased her, except the monster whom she saw every evening. She should have become accustomed to him, but he was in love with her, and this love made her apprehensive of some violence. "By the foolish compliments he pays me," said Beauty to her lover, "I find he desires to marry me. Would you advise me to consent?" "Alas, were he as charming as he is frightful, you have rendered my heart inaccessible to him and to all others, and I do not blush to own that I can love no one but you." So sweet a confession could but flatter the unknown, yet he replied to her only by saying, "Love him who loves you. Do not be misled by appearances, and release me from my prison." These words, continually repeated without any explanation, caused Beauty infinite distress.
This version of Beauty is not very, well, how do you say this? Well, she's not very smart. I mean, you're dreaming every night of a handsome guy who keeps telling you not to be judgy, and like, girl. She even has this vision of a throne with a beast sitting on it, and he's inviting her to join him. And when she does, he keeps shifting between the beast and the unknown, and she's like, what does it mean? What does it mean? It's like that, you know that meme with the lady and the math problems? Yeah. What does it mean? Sis, I don't know either. I don't know. Ugh. Anyway, okay. One night, she dreams of the unknown again, and this time he's trying to kill the beast. To her surprise, she stops him because she feels grateful to the beast and he doesn't deserve to die. Stockholm Syndrome, anyone? The mysterious lady appears and tells her again not to be deceived by appearances. Beauty wakes up and thinks about it but still can't figure out the meaning of her dreams. Time passes and even the magic mirror becomes boring. Beauty spends her days mostly blue and she tries to hide it with the usual excuses like a headache or she's just tired, until the Beast finally begs her to tell him what's wrong. Beauty misses her family. She wants to go home. She asks for permission to go visit them for 2 months and promises that when she comes back, she'll never ask for anything ever again. Ever. The Beast, being the closet drama queen he is, does not react very well to this. He collapses to the ground and accuses her of hating him so much she'd rather spend time with her awful sisters than with him. It might be a tantrum, it might be a panic attack, but you decide. But despite this, he agrees to let Beauty go but adds a warning that if she doesn't return in 2 months, she'll find him dead. He repeats this a couple of times and honestly, I don't blame him because this Beauty can be a little bit dense. I mean, how else will this emotional blackmail thing work? He tells her she'll wake up with her family in the morning and to return, all she has to do is turn her ring, putting the stone inside her hand and say, "I desire to return to my palace and behold my beast again." Beauty's too excited to sleep, but when she does, she sees the unknown who's sad. She asks him to leave with her. He can't. She says, "Don't worry, I'm coming back." He tells her all she has to do is stay away and the beast will die. She replies that she will always be loyal to the beast and she'll keep her promise to return. When she wakes up, she's in an unfamiliar bedroom, but she hears the voices of her family outside. She goes outside to greet them. Her father explains that with the gold the beast gave him, he was able to buy a new house and hire servants. Beauty is like, "Oh yeah, the beast is very generous." Her father tells her to just go ahead and marry him. Beauty still doesn't want to. Not because he's ugly, but because he's too dumb. I mean, what are they even going to talk about? Also, there's the unknown to think about. He's so dreamy. Get it? Dreamy? Anyway, okay, back to the story. At first, Beauty is content to spend time with her family, but she begins to miss the beast. Maybe absence does make the heart grow fonder. 2 months pass quickly and it's time for her to go. But she's finding it hard to say goodbye. She delays and delays until one day, she dreams of the beast in his palace. He's on the ground in a cave, dying. She sees the mysterious lady once again who warns her that to wait another day would be fatal. So she says goodbye to everyone, turns her ring, and says the words the beast told her to say. When she wakes up, she's back in the palace, but the beast is nowhere to be found. Her animal friends try to distract her, but it's a long wait until evening. It surprises her how much she wants to see the beast again. Doesn't matter that he's a little bit dumb, he's kind, and that's all that matters. That is, if you can call separating a girl from her family and isolating her in an abandoned castle kind. Remember, ladies, just because he's kind doesn't mean you should fall for him. A lot of people are kind in this world. Anyway, moving on. The hour of the beast's nightly visits arrive and she waits and she waits. He still doesn't come. She runs around the castle looking for him for about 3 hours until she remembers her dream before she left her father's house. She follows this memory and finds the cave where the beast is lying on the ground, just like in the vision. She touches him and he's cold. She starts to cry. She puts a hand to his heart and finds it faintly beating. Immediately, she runs out of the cave and finds a fountain and scoops water out with her hands. She returns to the beast and sprinkles it on him. She does this over and over again until her monkey friends fly to the palace and return with a vase for the water. After several splashes, the beast wakes up. Beauty confesses she loves him and doesn't want to lose him. The beast thanks her and assures her that he's gonna live now. He tells her to go and rest. So, yeah, in the original story, the beast doesn't transform in front of her. Instead, Beauty sleeps and this time dreams that the beast is dead at her feet, but he keeps switching between the unknown and back again. Beauty, BB, honey, You are almost there. You are doing so good, sweetie. Just a little bit more. Just connect the dots. You can do it. The next night, the Beast asks her to marry him again, and Beauty finally says yes.
She had scarcely uttered these words when a discharge of artillery was heard, and that she might not doubt it being a signal of rejoicing, she saw from her windows the sky all in a blaze with the light of 20,000 fireworks, which continued rising for 3 hours. They formed true lovers' knots, while on elegant escutcheons appeared Beauty's initials, and beneath them, in well-defined letters, "Long live Beauty and her husband!" After this display had terminated, the Beast took his departure, and Beauty retired to rest. No sooner was she asleep than her dear unknown paid her his usual visit. He was more richly attired than she had ever seen him. "How deeply am I obliged to you, charming Beauty," said he. "You have released me from the frightful prison in which I have groaned for so long a time. Your marriage with the Beast will restore a king to his subjects, a son to his mother, and life to a whole kingdom. We shall all be happy."
Bet you thought the story ends there, right? This next part usually gets cut from other versions because remember that the French name for these stories literally means tales of fairies? Yeah, you guessed it. It's fairy time. When Beauty wakes up, she sees the unknown beside her, and finally it clicks. The Beast and her dream lover are the same person! Wow! No one saw that coming at all! She tries to wake him up, but he keeps on sleeping. Ugh, men, right? So she goes off to do her thing when she hears a chariot arriving at the palace. 2 ladies enter. One of them she recognizes as the lady in her dreams. The lady explains that she's a fairy and her companion is a queen, the prince/beast's mother, who has come to give consent to their marriage. The queen is pleased with her son's fiancé at first until she inquires whom Beauty's parents are. Beauty says her mother is dead and she's just a merchant's daughter. The queen, like every telenovela mom we grew up with, is not very happy with this news. She insists that only a princess can marry her son. And the fairy's like, "Really? You're gonna be like that when this girl just saved your son's life?" While they're arguing, the prince/beast enters. He hugs his mother, thanks the fairy, and is about to go to Beauty when the fairy tells him why they're fighting. To Beauty, she asks, would she be willing to end the engagement if the prince wants to? And since the martyr is strong in this one and self-sacrifice is all she knows, Beauty says yes. She's just happy that she broke the curse. The fairy scolds the queen for being such a snob, but the queen remains firm and offers any of her other rich nobles in marriage to Beauty. Just please stay away from her beloved son. The prince begs his mother to consent to the marriage and even tells the fairy to turn him back into the beast if it means that Beauty can stay and marry him. And before anyone can say plot twist, the fairy reveals that Beauty is actually the queen's niece and therefore the prince's, cousin. But don't worry, this was totally fine during that time. Turns out she's the daughter of the king of Happy Island. Figures. Who was hidden away to protect her destiny as the prince's bride. Hearing this, the queen apologizes to Beauty and gives them her blessing. They leave to give the lovers some privacy, and if you think it ends there, nope, there's more. Beauty asks the prince for his backstory, so here goes. When his father, the king, died, a rival attacks their kingdom because he thinks the queen is weak. To protect her son, the queen gives him over to the care of a fairy, not the one we've already met, another one. Let's just say, a shady fairy. Yeah. So the queen goes off to war and it lasts longer than expected. The fairy takes care of the prince until her feelings become not so motherly. She tries to get the prince to fall in love with her, but he just doesn't. One day, when he's old enough, he asks permission to help out with the war. The fairy agrees as long as she can go with him. They arrive in the nick of time to save the queen and her army, and while celebrating, the fairy suddenly surprises everyone by announcing that she's going to marry the prince. The queen insults the fairy, telling her to look in the mirror and basically calls her an old hag. Well, not really an old hag, but she calls her old and ugly. The fairy goes, "Well, if beauty is the problem, I can fix that." Then she hits the prince in the head and he falls down and starts to transform into the beast.
The queen, at this dreadful sight, was almost out of her mind. To put the last seal upon her barbarity, the furious fairy said to me in an ironical tone, "Go make illustrious conquests, more worthy of thee than an august fairy. And as sense is not required when one is so handsome, I command thee to appear as stupid as thou art horrible, and to remain in the state until a young and beautiful girl shall, of her own accord, come to seek thee, although fully persuaded thou wilt devour her. She must also," continued the fairy, "after discovering that her life is not in danger, conceive for thee a sufficiently tender affection to induce her to marry thee. Until thou canst meet with this rare maiden, it is my pleasure that thou remain an object of horror to thyself and to all who behold thee. As for you, too happy mother of so lovely a child," said she to the queen, "I warn you that if you acknowledge to anyone that this monster is your son, he shall never recover his natural shape. Neither interest, nor ambition, nor the charms of his conversation must assist to restore him to it. Adieu. Do not be impatient. You will not have long to wait. Such a darling will soon find a remedy for his misfortune."
The queen and the beast are in despair when our good fairy arrives. She tells the queen she will do everything in her power to help them. So she casts a spell and changes every living thing in the castle into a statue. Then she separates the castle from time so they won't age, and then raises the fog around it so that only a chosen few can enter. When Beauty's merchant father gets lost in the woods, she returns to tell the beast that his savior is finally coming. She gives him instructions. Number 1, threaten the father. Number 2, play stupid and don't ever tell her who you are. He also reveals that the fairy made him invisible during the day so that he could watch Beauty do stuff around the castle. Yeah, that is hella creepy. So when Beauty leaves to see her family, it makes the beast so unhappy that he stops eating. And even the fairy's powers couldn't save him. Which was why he was dying when Beauty found him. It was her tears that brought him back to life again. Another chariot arrives, and this time it's the queen's brother. Beauty embraces her new father, who's all confused at first until the fairy explains that Beauty is his long-lost daughter and blah blah blah. Here's more backstory. Plot twist again! Beauty's mother is actually the fairy's sister. Marriage is a no-no between fairies and humans, so she keeps it a secret until another fairy, the evil one, discovers it. Beauty's mother is imprisoned in the land of the Fae, and her daughter is cursed to be married to a monster. But this isn't enough for the evil fairy. She wants to marry the king herself, so she orders someone to kill Beauty, who's only 3 years old then. The good fairy disguises herself as a bear and attacks Beauty's would-be murderers. She then carries her away to safety and swaps her with the merchant's youngest daughter, who had unfortunately, and quite conveniently, just died. Later, when the evil fairy punishes the prince, the good fairy is delighted because now she has a way to lift her niece's curse as well. The king thanks the fairy and had just asked whether he'll ever see his wife again when boom! Said wife suddenly appears. She's free now because she made a deal with the fairy queen. This reunion is interrupted by even more visitors. Beauty's foster family arrives. She explains that she's a secret fairy princess after all, but they're still her family in her heart. Aw. And since everyone's here, Beauty and her prince finally get married. The fairy turns the statues back to humans, and the celebration lasts for many, many days until the fairy says, "Hey guys, maybe we should return to ruling our kingdoms now?" The newlyweds are so in love that they propose to Megxit themselves out of their royal duties. The fairy, instead, gifts them with a carriage with more magic horses so that they can escape to travel whenever they want to without wasting any time. And with that, and the help of a little fairy magic, everyone lives a long and happily ever after. Wait, there's more! I'm kidding. That's it. That is their happily ever after. Stories of young women being married off to old and likely ugly men was so relatable in the 16th century that Beauty and the Beast has been told and retold many times over. Its earliest root was the myth of Cupid and Psyche, but it shares a lot of elements with older folktales starring animal bridegrooms. Scholars would also point out Petrus Gonzalez as a possible real-life inspiration. Petrus lived in the 1500s and suffered from a genetic disorder called hypertrichosis, or werewolf syndrome. You can Google what that looked like. He was a favorite at the court of Henry II, King of France, and the Queen arranged for his marriage with the lady, Catherine, who didn't know who her bridegroom was and didn't see him until their wedding day. Still, their marriage was supposedly affectionate. Did you know that we also have our very own Filipino folktale similar to Beauty and the Beast? Collected by Dean Fansler and first published in 1921, this story from Bicol was narrated by Pedro D. El Soreta of Viracalbay, who heard it from his grandfather. It's called The Enchanted Prince. A rich king lives in a city beside a wild wood, which is home to many wicked witches. The king has a son, Okay, who falls in love with one of these witches, but the king wants him to marry someone from the city instead. At first, the son refuses, but the king orders his soldiers to bring him every beautiful woman in the kingdom. He picks one girl and tells Okay to marry her. Afraid of his father, Okay consents. This angers the witch, and no sooner had the marriage happened when she casts a spell in revenge. She turns the city into a forest, her ex into a monkey, and the rest of the people into other animals. She tells her lover that he will recover his human shape after 5 centuries, and only when he finds a girl to live with him and love him more than anything else in the world. 4 centuries pass. The enchanted city is forgotten and a new city is built over it. A church is constructed near the foot of the tree where the monkey prince lives, and he decides that the best way to break the curse is to kidnap a lady. Unfortunately, she dies of fright as soon as she sees him, so he decides to do it again. This one also dies, so he sits and waits for another opportunity. One day, a beautiful yet poor girl leaves the church before Mass is over. She's sad because the man she's in love with is rich and has left her to marry another rich girl. This is the chance that the monkey prince is waiting for, and he carries the girl up to the tree. She would have died also, but she sees something gentle in his eyes, so she takes pity on him. As the days pass, she falls more and more in love with the poor creature. What do you know? 3rd time's the charm. On the evening of the 10th day, she's surprised when she finds herself beside a handsome prince in an elegant room instead of the tree she's been living in. At first, she thinks she's dreaming, but he tells her the story of his life and she exclaims, "Ah, me, God is wise." She breaks the spell, becomes queen, and everyone lives happily ever after. Of course, the idea that your love can turn a beast into a man or a frog into a prince is probably one of the most dangerous romantic delusions of our age. But that's another discussion for another time. And there we go! Thanks for listening. I hope I was able to make the tale of Beauty and the Beast a little bit easier to digest. Well, this version at least. I'm Gabby, and you can find me at GabbyPascuavox on Instagram and Twitter, or use the hashtag Digestibles Podcast. Special thanks to Merrick again for providing the narrations and Jazz for composing our theme music. Oh, and by the way, I just found out that we have listeners from the US, UK, and Canada. Dude, that is so cool. Hello to you guys. Thank you for listening to us. Anyway, that was it for this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and please look forward to the next one next week. Digestibles is part of Connect, a podcast network, bringing together entertaining stories to spark your imagination. For more awesome content, follow us on social media @Connect Podcasts.